Alright, I'm going to go over a few commands for SRX. Majorly, I'm going to deal with just the show commands, and then we're going to get into some of the commit commands and the variations of those. So when you first log into a SRX, you will log in outside of the edit mode, which is basically the same as Cisco, where you log in and you have to go into enable mode. For the SRX, all you're going to do is you're going to hit CLI, which will bring you into a CLI menu where you can run some show commands, but I'm going to specifically talk about show commands within the edit window, because the edit is where you'll actually have the opportunity to edit and make configuration changes to the SRX. So we'll go into edit, and now you are in where you can make edit changes, or like in Cisco, the config T. So from here, let's talk about some of the show commands that you will use. So the first one that we're going to look at is just show, and this is in Cisco's terminology the same as show run. So this will go through and you can see the configuration of the entire SRX. This is good if you just want to kind of scan through and look at all the sections and pieces and just scroll through the entire config. There is a lot of other show commands that will allow you to break it down a little bit, to do it in more bite-sized pieces, and to give you a good view of the different sections. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to do show interfaces. When we do show interfaces, it is going to show you only the physical interfaces that are configured on the SRX, and it'll give you the full config of how those are laid out. Another show interface, which will give you like a show interface status to show you if they're up or down, and it'll give you all the interfaces, not just the ones that are configured. And so this is a show command that is you have to do it a little different, because you're in the like config T mode, just like you do in Cisco, where you have to do show run and then whatever to get it, because you're in the config mode. So this is a command that has to be done outside of config mode, but you can still do it while you're in config mode. You just have to do run in front, show interface, terse. And this will show you all of the interfaces that are on the SRX and their status, if they're up or down. Because this is a virtual SRX, it shows a little bit different. It's not going to show more than the interfaces I've got configured, because it doesn't know that there's any more than that. But on the others, if you do this on a full SRX, it will show you all the physical interfaces that are connected, and if they're up or down, and the IP that are associated with it. So this is a good way to get a good look at all your interfaces that are on the SRX and their current status. Alright, so let's look at digging into the config a little bit more. So a big part of your SRXs are the policies. So let's do show security policies. And this will just show you the config part that deals with just the security policies. So from zone trust to zone trust. So anything that's going in between trust zone to trust zone, here is the policies that will affect that. From zone trust to zone untrust. So anything going from the trust zone to the untrust zone, and here are the policies that match. So from here you can see that the default policy matches any trust zone source, any destination, any untrust, and any applications that are HTTP or HTTPS 80 or 443. So we're allowing anything from trust to untrust that are 80 and 443 to be permitted. And then we break down another policy, a DNS. So from any trust going to any address Google DNS, which is a address book, which we'll get into in another segment video, how to do these and define these. But in there we'll have the IPs that are associated with that, and the applications DNS TCP and DNS UDP traffic. So there's multiple policies in here that you can just keep adding policies based on what you're trying to pinhole, going from the trust, from your secure out to your unsecure or untrust zone. Alright, so let's look now at the show security NAT. So these are your NAT configurations. Anything that's dealing with NATing, network address translation, from your untrust to trust. So from zone untrust, we'll have multiple rules in here. So for this is your RDP servers that we are creating some from the untrust coming in. So we have some rules that will allow you to come from the outside to your trust, and we're natting those in, and we'll get into this in more deep detail in another video. But this will show you all of the NAT configurations that are associated with your config. So let's look at the zones, the security zones. We keep saying untrust and trust zones. So let's do show security zones. So here in the config are your various zones. So we've got the trust and the untrust zones. And you can see here when we talk about the Google DNS, this is where we define it and the IPs that are associated with it. DNS1, DNS2, which you can find up here. So this is creating your address books that you can use within your config within that zone. As you can see, there's an address book in trust and an address book in untrust. So when you're creating any rules and you're using these names, it has to be associated with the untrust zone if you're referring to it in here. But you can see within here, you can see all the configurations and things that are associated with that zone, including to what interfaces are part of that zone. And then on the untrust interface that's associated with it. So another show command that is very helpful is the show type display set. So with this will actually show you the configuration command that you would enter to create or to assign the commands that are in the config. So you could use these if you were wanting to create another policy. You could see all the commands that were used to create a specific policy. And so this will kind of help you on figuring out what commands might be needed to create a new one or add to it. If we wanted to add another under this policy, default permit, and we wanted to add FTP to it, we could enter this whole entire command, except for we would have FTP instead of Junos HTTPS, and it would assign it into that default permit group. So this set display command is very useful for you to really see how things are built, and how you can recreate zones or interfaces or address books, NATs. So there's a lot of good information to be able to see here to help you figure out how something was built that's already there. So now, after we have created things, there's some commit commands that we need to go over. So with this will allow you to write to memory, so to speak, on the Cisco side. This would be to commit it to the config. But there's multiple ways that you can do this, and allows you to validate that the commands you've entered are correct and there's not a problem, to writing it, and then if something breaks, that it will revert back automatically. So one command is to show compare. So here is a show compare of what is running in the config and what we have made a change to but hasn't been committed. So in here I've created a new interface, but it hasn't been written to the config. It hadn't been committed. So when you do show compare, it's going to show you what is going to be committed. So this is a good way to determine, after you've made some changes, to be able to go back and look at it and go, oh yeah, that's what I needed, or oh yeah, I forgot this, or oh nope, I didn't need that anymore, let me delete that. So you can really see what it is. So another thing you can do is to validate, to make sure there's no problems before you commit check. And this will go and check to make sure that the configuration that you've entered is good and there's no problems. And if there is a problem, it'll pop up and tell you that there was an issue before it commits it. Another way to make sure that you don't run into problems is to commit confirm, and then give it how many minutes. So what this does is, it will commit the config and set it into motion, and if you don't confirm that configuration change within 5 minutes, it will revert back automatically. So this is a good feature if you make a change, especially if you're making a change on the interface or a policy that is how you are accessing it through your management network, and you break it and you can no longer get in, that after 5 minutes it will revert back that change and not commit it. So that's a good security measure to prevent you from locking yourself out accidentally on a configuration change that you made that didn't go as expected. And then just the commit. If you do just the commit, it's going to go through and it's going to commit the changes that are still there. Now, if you do commit and there's a problem, it's going to pop up and tell you, hey, I ran into this problem and we need to you need to fix this before you can commit. So those changes that you made weren't committed because it errored out before it did, and it'll tell you the reasonings, basic reasonings why it couldn't commit those changes. Now, the last thing I'm going to go over is, let's say you made several configuration changes and, well, no, I don't need to do that. There's an easy way to remove the last changes, and that's just rollback. So when you do a rollback, you can see you've got multiple choices of when it was committed. So if you want to roll back several changes back, or just the previous changes. So you can see how it rolled those changes back. It rolled back to the previous before the committed, 0, and then before that I rolled it back to the one before that, and now that interface is gone. Alright, I hope you found these commands helpful, and we'll continue with more in-depth SRX configurations in future videos.